Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. I'm Sarah Wood, Executive Director at PMBA. I have a few housekeeping notes. You'll notice that when you signed on, you are in listen-only mode, but we do encourage participation. You should see on your screen a white panel with an area for questions and chat. As we're going along, if you have a question, please type it in that box. The panel will stop periodically throughout the presentation to respond. Also, if you would like to receive CPE credit for today's session, please be sure to email info@pmbaonline.org to request your certificate. So with that, let me introduce you to our speakers today. Courtney Morris, CSG Coordinator, will be our main presenter, and she will be joined by Kara Dalrymple, VP of Human Resources, and Greg Schneering, VP of CSG and Station Initiatives. Andrew Charnick, Director of Radio, CSG Policy and Administration, will be moderating our questions. Today, CPB will go over the purpose of the training as well as cover the basics, including the new CSG harassment prevention training requirement, your options for complying with the new requirement, and detailed information on the harassment prevention program that CPB is offering at no cost to stations. We will conclude the webinar with a few popular FAQs. If your question was not covered in today's webinar, please check the CPB website at www.cpb.org or reach out to them at csg@cpb.org. So with that, I will turn it over to the CPB team.
And a very good afternoon to you. I'm Greg Schneering. And Sarah, we want to thank you, and also we want to thank PMBA for hosting this webinar this afternoon. It is greatly appreciated. On February 26th of this year, CPB's President and CEO, Pat Harrison, in announcing the harassment prevention training requirement, said this: "We can create a positive workplace environment through prompt detection and enforcement, enhanced by an informed workforce that recognizes violations and has multiple avenues through which to report and respond to all violations. All organizations, large and small, must systematically reinforce their employees' understanding and intolerance of workplace harassment." In that spirit, we present this webinar this afternoon to help achieve a safe working environment for all who work at your station on a regular basis. We're now going to turn off the camera to focus on the agenda this afternoon. So we're going to begin the webinar by looking at the basics of the harassment prevention training requirement. That's our first agenda item. Our second agenda item is we're also going to review the Navex Global Harassment Prevention Training System that CPB is providing to stations at no cost. And we'll show you how the frequently asked questions section on the harassment prevention webpage works. After each agenda item, we will take your questions. Andrew Charnick, Director of Radio, CSG Policy and Administration, will be monitoring your questions as they come in, and he's going to moderate that section of the webinar this afternoon. We'll get to as many of your questions as possible, and we will be capturing all of them to help inform and update the website materials. Also, I want to recognize Lauren Douglas, who's in the room this afternoon. She is the administrator in the System Development and Media Strategy Department, and she is doing the important job of running our PowerPoint slides today. And so thank you, Lauren. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kara Dalrymple, Vice President of Human Resources at the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Hello, everyone. We want to help you identify on our website where to locate pertinent information. As you know, many organizations train their personnel to recognize, avoid, and report workplace discrimination, including harassment, and to ensure that our CPB-supported public media stations consistently follow this practice. CPB has now required annual harassment prevention training for all its officers, employees, full and part-time, and its interns, paid and unpaid, for each grantee. All people in this definition must take harassment prevention training for the purposes of CSG qualifications so that your head of grantee and licensee official can certify your annual CSG agreement and certification of eligibility when it is released in early November. We have in-depth information about this new CSG requirement on CPB's website. To start, we'll walk you through finding where that information is located, and then we'll turn it over to Courtney for the main presentation piece. To find the Harassment Prevention Training Requirement webpage, please go to www.cpb.org. CPB's website page looks like this. There are two ways to access all of the documents that your station needs to stay in compliance with your CSG grant, and specifically today, we're going to focus on the Harassment Prevention Training Program requirement. So let's show you how to get to the webpage. You can click on the grants arrow on the header of the website. Then the Community Service Grants is a second option on the drop-down menu. Or the more direct option is to simply click Community Service Grants, which is located under the Resources tab on the far right of your screen on the CPB homepage.
So Sarah actually has a poll question for you. Sarah, would you mind putting up the poll question?
There you go, everybody. The question is the definition of who is required to take the harassment prevention training clear to you? Yes or no? We'll leave this open for a few more seconds here. Everyone get those answers in. Just a few more seconds, and then I'm going to give this a close. It looks like most everybody's answered. All right, we'll be closing. And our results are up right now. Our attendees should be able to see them, but just in case you can't, it looks like 75% say yes, it is clear, and 25% say no.
So I think what we'll do then is when we get to the question stage, we can perhaps clarify just a bit more.
And back to accessing the training documents that you'll need on the home page. Once you click on the Community Service Grants, you will see the following screen that you see now. Because the harassment prevention requirement is part of your CSG agreement and certification of eligibility that your head of grantee and licensee official must sign in order for you to receive your FY 2019 CSG. You will find information regarding it under the compliance header. It is the first option. Next, Courtney will take you through our first agenda item, and then we'll break for questions.
All right, once you click Harassment Prevention Training Program, this will be your next screen. From this screen, you can access the online form to request new licenses, send us an email by clicking Contact Us, or view the FAQs. So full disclosure, rattling off harassment prevention training programs several times is time-consuming and can be redundant. So for the purposes of the webinar moving forward, I will frequently shorten the harassment prevention training program or requirement to HPT program or HPT requirement. All right, so there are two ways to become compliant with the new HPT requirement. The first is to take the CPB-sponsored Navex training. This training is an interactive online harassment prevention training module from Navex Global. It instructs your personnel individually on the following topics: what constitutes acceptable and unacceptable workplace behavior, how to recognize harassment when it occurs, and how to report and respond to violations. A few notes if you're thinking about using the Navex training. We cannot customize the content nor the language of the module. The training is distributed via email, and for that reason, only one person can be associated with any given address. And lastly, the training is to be done individually, except in rare instances, with approval from CPB prior. Our second option is to provide an HPT program of your choice. The program that you and your station chooses will be deemed as compliant as long as it covers the same areas that the Navex training covers. Those areas are what constitutes acceptable and unacceptable workplace behavior, how to recognize harassment when it occurs, and how to report and respond to violations. A few notes to keep in mind if you choose a training program other than the Navex training. While the Navex training should be done individually, any HPT training of your choice can be done in a group setting. Also, we are not going to vet your program in order to gauge its compliance. Now, Sarah has 2 more poll questions for you.
All right, our first poll question for this section is, do you know how to gauge whether the HPT program of your choice complies with CPB standards for a satisfactory HPT program? Say that 5 times fast. We got our results coming in. Everyone, a few more seconds. All right, looks like votes are slowing down. All right, we're going to give this a close and see how everybody voted. And I'll share the results with you. All right, it looks like 82% understand how to gauge the standards and 18% do not. All right, are you ready for me to share the next poll?
Yes.
All right, so for our next question, we have, when can you take HPT training in a group setting? Those votes coming in, about half of you. It's a short question, so I'll just give it a few more seconds. All right, it looks like most people voted, so I'm going to close this poll. All right, so when can you take the HPT training in a group setting? 10% say when I use the Navex training program, and 90% when I use an HPT program of my choice. All right, that's the end of the poll for this section.
All right, so when does everyone at the station need to be trained? All required staff should be trained by October 1st, 2018 in order for your head of grantee and licensee official to sign your FY 2019 CSG agreement and certification of eligibility and receive your first CSG payment in a timely manner. We suggest that you get the bulk of your employees trained after you get the bulk of your employees trained to make this a part of your onboarding process. And we have one more poll question for you in this section. Sarah, would you mind getting that up for us?
Certainly. Will not getting employees trained by October 1st, 2018 affect your first CSG payment? These votes coming in real quick. We got everything coming in. All right, it looks like most everyone voted, so I'm going to give this a close. And sharing the results, it looks like 96% say yes, and then we have 4% saying no. All righty.
Thank you, Sarah. So now we're going to take questions about the CSG harassment prevention requirement. Andrew will facilitate.
Thank you, Courtney. So we have quite a few questions that have come through. We will try to get to as many as possible in this limited time we have. So just back to the poll we did a little while ago, can you please clarify that we can do live group training?
So if you use a HPT program of your choice, so that means non-Navex, you're not using the Navex training, you can use any program in any setting that you would like. So if the vendor has a group setting training set up, you can use that.
So not the Navex?
No.
The Navex training is tied to a license, and so that's why we need to have it taken individually. There may be certain very, very narrow circumstances, where group training would be allowed only in a situation where internet access is very, very spotty in rural areas, but it would be something where you would need to call CPB and talk with us about that ahead of time. Very narrow circumstance.
Okay, is there a period of time where we cannot use the system while CPB compiles completion statistics or other system maintenance? Is it simply open?
So it's generally open all the time. If there's something going on with the software, Navex will contact us and we'll contact the stations to let you guys know that it's down. I think that happened perhaps in March or April, where they needed to fix some things on their end. So we sent out an email saying that Navex would not be available from one date to another. But that's the only instance that would happen, and we would actually notify all the stations what was going on.
Okay. We have quite a few questions about volunteers, interns, and temporary employees. Is it possible to explain when volunteers or if volunteers should use the training?
So I think probably the easiest way to talk about that, Andrew, is first of all a bit of a disclaimer, and that is that for purposes of CSG certification, CPB defers to the station's determination of which personnel constitute officers, employees, and interns. But what we want to do is be able to give you some examples. So first, for the purposes of CSG certification, all officers of the station are required to take the training. Let me give you some examples of what are meant by officers. So these are officers of the station and would include people with titles like President and CEO, General Manager, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and Vice Presidents, those having those kinds of titles. Then, in terms of all other employees, those people include people who are paid a salary or hourly wage and who work regularly at your station, whether full or part-time. And interns, anybody who you designate as an intern, whether they are paid or unpaid. So we were not able to, because there are a lot of different definitions of interns, we were not able to come up with a ubiquitous definition of interns. So you should use the definition that is in place at your station or university when it comes to interns. Now, that is for the purpose of CSG certification. All officers, all other employees, and interns, paid or unpaid. So let's just draw a line right there. And now let's take up the issue of volunteers. So volunteers are not required to take the training for purposes of CSG certification. However, if you have volunteers, and I'll give an example here, if you have a volunteer that comes in to do a DJ shift, maybe 3 or 4 times a week, what we're interested in is ensuring that there is a safe working environment for all people who work at your station on a regular basis. So while volunteers are not required for the CSG certification. CPB will make available Navex licenses at no cost to the station so that you are able to train volunteers and other people who are there at your station on a regular basis. We do not define regular. That's something that you will have to define.
Great. I think that's really helpful. Like I said, there are quite a few questions around that topic, so this should be really useful. There's another question here. It says, I work for a state network. We are the licensee, and we have a 501c3 foundation for our fundraising. They are housed in the same building with us. Are the foundation employees required to take the training?
So for purposes, applying what I just said, for purposes of the CSG certification, they are not required to take the training. However, if they work in your building on a regular basis, again, CPB is more than happy in this first year to provide at no cost to the station licenses, Navex licenses, so that those people can be trained as well.
We do have a question that deals with employees out on FMLA, whether they should take the training, or are they able to take that when they come back, for example, and still certify, or is there other things that they have to consider?
So from a human resources perspective, they should not take it while they're on FMLA leave, but they should be able to take it when they come back. And we'll note that, and they need to note that in the records that they're keeping on who's taking the training and who's not, and how long that period of FMLA leave is.
I think one of the things like that Kara just mentioned is very important. I think a memo to the file, keeping records like that in those kinds of situations, contemporaneous records, is a very important thing.
Give me 1 second here. It is surprising how many questions we have. In terms of documentation, Greg, what types of documentation do they need to keep on file? Is the Navex system keeping its documentation, or is there other documentation?
Yes, and I'll let Courtney or Kara basically give you the details on that. But one of the great benefits of using the no-cost Navex training is because there are records, contemporaneous records kept, and you can run reports on those records.
Right, and we'll get into that when we actually discuss the Navex training itself. So the Navex will tell you who has started the training, who has completed the training, and who has yet to take the training. However, notes such as so-and-so is on FMLA and they started on this date, they'll be back on this date, and they'll take it at a different time, that won't be a Navex. So those other kind of nuanced notes will have to be kept separately.
Memo to the file.
Okay. Easy question here. How long does the Navex training take?
30 minutes approximately. Do we have any more questions regarding the requirements?
Why don't we do this, Andrew? Why don't we, if there are more questions, we can come back to them at the end.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay.
Good.
So the rest of the information today is going to pertain to the Navex training system that CPB is providing. If you're interested in using the Navex training system, the first step is for the station contact, also known as the administrator, to request licenses. Licenses can be requested using our online form, which you will find on the Harassment Prevention Training Program webpage, located at www.csg-supported.org. cpb.org. If you need help navigating to this page, please follow the instructions detailed at the beginning of the webinar. That will bring you to the page that we are viewing now. Upon clicking Online Form, you will see this. This form needs to be filled out in its entirety if you wish to request licenses for employees at your station. Right here, what I did was complete the license form so you know what it would look like completed. A few things to keep in mind as you fill out the form. The number of licenses is the number of officers, employees, interns, and individuals who need to take the training at your station. If you have 30 individuals at your station, you will need to request 30 licenses. Please request only the number of licenses that you currently need. Should you need more licenses down the line, you can always return to this form and submit another request. Those who are required to take the training for the purpose of CSG certification are officers, employees, full and part-time, as well as interns, paid or unpaid. Examples of officers are presidents, COOs, general managers, and CFOs. Because our biggest priority is creating a safe workplace for all at your station, CPB will provide additional licenses to train those who work regularly at the station, but may not fall under those direct definitions. Those individuals can be your board members, they can be contractors and or volunteers. To receive licenses for them, simply include them in the total license count that you give us on the form. If you are a joint licensee with employees who don't share stations, please fill out one form per station and submit each separately. You may have up to 2 station contacts or administrators. But for the purpose of filling out this form, please enter the name of the primary administrator only. If you need a second administrator, please send us a note to csg@cpb.org with the name and contact information for the second administrator. And now Sarah has one more poll question for you. Sarah, would you mind putting that up?
All right, so do you understand the process of signing up to use the Navex Harassment Prevention Training Program? Give everyone a second to answer here. You all know the drill by now. Looks everybody's in, more. All right, we're at about 90% voted, so I'm gonna go ahead and give this a close. And our results, overwhelmingly, the answer is yes. 98% say they do understand. We still have 2% that say no.
Thank you, Sarah.
You're very welcome.
All right, once you've submitted a request for licenses, this is the screen you should see. This means your submission was successful. Now we'll discuss the process after you have submitted a request for licenses. Licenses do not automatically become available once your request has been submitted. The first thing that happens is a request is submitted online. That request goes to our web developer. It then goes on to the CSG team, me, where information is reviewed and verified. It is then sent to Navex, so they can set up your station and your station administrator with administrative rights in the Navex system. Soon after, the station administrator will receive an email which includes login credentials and instructions for setting up their station in Navex from CPB. We will need at least 3 to 4 business days to process everything and to get you set up in the system initially. Once you've already been set up in the system, you can immediately add your new employees into the system after submitting your license request form online. If you request a demo, this is what you will receive. This allows you to review the content of the training before deciding to use it at your station. You have the option of viewing it as a video, audio plus images, or no audio, just the images. After choosing a method for viewing the demo, you will see the screen. This will allow you to review the individual modules. If you look up to the top right corner of your demo screen, you will see two tabs, Policy and Questions. Upon clicking the Policy tab, you will come to the screen. We will not be able to add your individual station's policy to the training module. It is a customization that costs extra per station, thus impractical for the number of stations that we're currently servicing. While the Policies tab is not customizable, you will see in the official training module standard information regarding harassment prevention policies. If you are interested in viewing the standard language presented in the official training module, please reach out to us at CSG@cpb.org to get a copy of it. Upon clicking the Questions tab, you will come to this screen. We will not be able to add your individual station's contact information to this training module. It is also a customization that costs extra per station. That's impractical. While the Questions tab is not customizable, you will see in the official training module a standardized memo suggesting that all employees contact management should any incidents of harassment arise. If you're interested in viewing the standard language presented, please reach out to us at csg@cpb.org to get a copy of it. So you've submitted your license request and CPB and Navex have processed it. What happens next? After we receive and process your license request, the station administrator who's listed on the license request form will receive an email. That email will have a link to the Navex training as well as login information specific to this station administrator. The email will also include 3 attachments: a Navex video tutorial, a 2-page PDF that walks you through creating user accounts in Navex, as well as the employee user accounts spreadsheet. CPB is willing to assist in setting up employee user accounts during this initial implementation phase, which ends Friday, September 14th. The employee user account spreadsheet is one of the documents sent to the station administrator upon signing up their station to take the Navex training. This is what it looks like. It is important to fill out all fields on the spreadsheet as we need all of the information in order to set up the account. There are 6 fields to complete. Once the form has been completed, it should be sent to csg@cpb.org. A couple of notes to keep in mind as you fill out this form. The last column refers to the auto email feature. That feature sends an email to your employees individually, providing them with login information and a link to the training. If you would like CPB to take care of that for you, just put yes in the last column of the spreadsheet. New hires who take the training as part of the onboarding process in the future will need to receive their information individually. The training link is distributed via email, and for that reason, only one person can be associated with any given email address. You cannot use an email address for more than one person or the creation of more than one account. If you are a joint licensee and plan on turning in one spreadsheet for both stations, please add an additional column that will let us know which station each employee belongs to. If you are a joint licensee whose employees work across stations, just let us know, and all employees will be housed under one group, whether it is the TV group, the FM group, or the AM group. If you are setting up the accounts yourself, you don't need to send us the spreadsheet. This is simply a tool that we're using to help set up the accounts for you guys. Next are instructions for if you would like to use the Navex training, but would prefer to create the accounts for your employees yourself. The station contact listed on the license request form has the ability to create and manage their own station accounts and will be required to do so after September 14th. As the administrator, you can reset passwords, update the name and email fields, as well as run reports on the employee's progress towards the training requirement. The station administrator will receive a PDF via email that instructs them on how to create user accounts. We will go over that process briefly right now. First thing you're going to do once you've logged in is click the Users button on the left gray bar. Then you're going to click the orange Create button in the upper right-hand corner. You're going to enter the user's login name, first name and last name in the appropriate fields. Enter the user's email address in the email field so they can receive notifications. For type, always click Student. Student here means that the individual is enrolled in the harassment module to take the training. Enter a password into both the password and the verify field. Then click Save. What you see on your screen right now is an example of how the profiles should look once they've been completely filled out. Immediately upon saving, click Group Information button on the left orange menu. Click the Add button. Select the groups you want to add the user to. You should receive a message at the top of the screen that the user was successfully added to the group. These steps will create your employee's profile and enroll them in the correct training module. Please note, if you do not select the group for your employee, you will not be able to see them in the system going forward. If you entered your own employees but would like CPB to set up the automated email notifications for your staff, just email us at csg@cpb.org letting us know as much. You can also send the link and login information to employees yourself. CPB has a template you can use. If you're interested in viewing that template, please let us know. Once employees receive their notification email, they can follow the link and log in. Once you log in, your class is listed as Workplace Harassment 7 General. Click Launch, and it should start the training automatically. If your training doesn't start, check and make sure you're using either Chrome or Firefox, as Navex Training works best in those two browsers. You will also need to allow pop-ups, as the module will launch in a new screen. This training takes approximately 30 minutes. An important part of complying with the new requirement is documentation. Navex has a built-in feature that automatically tracks who has taken the training. Should you choose a program other than the Navex training, you are still responsible for tracking who has completed the training and when they completed the training. For those using an alternative program, a sign-in sheet is a sufficient way to document who has taken the training. Right now, we're going to walk through how to run an enrollment report in Navex. The first step is to click the launch reports on the left-hand side of the screen. The launch reports icon is the last icon on the panel that kind of resembles papers. Then you're going to scroll down and you're going to click Enrollment Report. You will then need to fill out the following parameters in order to create your report. You're going to fill out your enrollment start and end date. You're going to select Workplace Harassment 7 General Edition. Select your class status, which can be completed, in progress, not started. You can do all three or a combination. Select your group name. You should see only your group or groups listed. Active is actually already selected by default, but should you want to see the Information on those that are inactive, you can select inactive on the drop-down menu. You'll then click Apply to run the report. Once you run the report, you should get a graph that will give you the percentages of the employees who have started, completed, or have yet to start the training module. By clicking on the icon of the 2 gears at the top of your graph, you can change the graph type. Beneath the graph is a short list of employees and their training status per variable selected for the graph. Just export the report into an Excel spreadsheet to see the report in its entirety. Thank you for listening. We are now going to take questions about the Navex training system. Andrew will facilitate those.
Thank you, Courtney. So we had, again, as I mentioned before, quite a few questions come in, but I believe some of the earlier questions have been answered by this part of the presentation. So feel free to send in questions that you may have answered before and may need more clarification, or questions that have come up in this part. I'll be monitoring it. We do have a question about not completing by October 1st. Stations will not receive their first payment, but is there any penalty associated with not completing by October 1st this year?
The penalty for not completing by October 1st is you will not be able to certify your CSG until you have completed all of your employees have completed the training.
There's also a question about translation. There are some employees that need different language. Is there any functionality in Navex that allows for translation?
No, so that's a customization that we do not have.
Okay.
So they will not be able, we cannot change the language of the training module.
For joint stations, do stations use one ID or do they need to use 2 IDs separately to track?
So it really depends. We have some stations who have taken it already who are using one ID. We have other stations who are using both. Most of the stations who are using one ID actually have employees who work across stations. So they're not necessarily at the FM station or only at the AM station. They work at both. So you can do whatever is most comfortable for you.
And that would be the same for TV, radio, splits.
Right,
Okay.
yes.
Will the PowerPoint be available after this presentation?
Yes, we plan on making the PowerPoint available.
There, Navex, there was a question about whether this has some cost associated with it for next year. It is free this year, is that correct?
It is free this year. Greg can tell you more about the cost, if there will be one associated next year.
Yes. For this year, at no cost to stations, there is a cost to CPB, and we have been purchasing the licenses for you. And when we roll out the program for next year, we will make an announcement then as to the situation.
Okay, thank you. So just a clarification on the language question. There is a software that's able to translate the Navex training. Is that allowed? Is that something that we have any thoughts on, or do we want to just maybe take that offline?
Let's take that offline.
Okay.
So if they email csg@cpb.org and let us know particularly what the software is, how it works, we may be able to give them an answer.
Okay. And then you had mentioned about reporting and submitting and documentation. Is there anything that stations need to submit to CPB after they sign up?
No. So you'll have everyone complete it so you can certify, but really the documentation is for if for any reason the station is audited and Office OIG needs to see records. So you'll want to have the records readily available for them that supports the claim that all employees took the training.
And I would say, just to follow up on that, if you're taking training of your choice, you do have to have documentation of the people that have taken it tucked away in your file, because as Courtney mentioned, in case the Inspector General wants to see it. We assume that if you had university training, that no doubt the university has some type of electronic form in order to capture who took it. But if you happen to just have, somebody from, a local office come in, to do training for your staff one day, I also assume that probably your HR director captured a list of who was in attendance that day. Regardless, one way or another, you should maintain your list of people who have taken the training.
Okay, great. If you have any last questions, feel free to send those.
Maybe one administrative note. I had a question yesterday from a station wondering about the year for the training year for next year. We will, again announce that at a later day when we roll out the training, but most likely it will be October 1st of 2018 through September 30th of 2019. Basically aligning it with CPB's fiscal year. This year, we wanted to give you every opportunity to get the training in, so we went past September 30th, gave you that extra day. I also wanted to thank three people, Esperanza from WXPN, John from Prairie Public, and also Cheryl from WUWM in Milwaukee. All three of those folks have been extraordinarily helpful to us as we prepared materials for this webinar.
Okay, just one final question here. In terms of turnaround time, we have several questions around they've sent some information in and they have not received a response back or received the links. Is there some expected turnaround time that users can expect?
Yes, so it does take 3 to 4 business days for us to kind of turn things around. I've noticed often we've actually sent, the station administrator has been sent their link so that they can log in. They've been sent the documents, whether it's the employee user spreadsheet and how to create user accounts and their credentials, and for some reason it's gone into spam, or they don't know that they have it, and we've actually resent it to them. So just contact us if you feel that you've waited longer than a week for the station administrator to actually get their documents or their email.
Okay, and that would be the CSG@CPB.org.
Yes, CSG@CPB.org. And if you've sent in an employee user spreadsheet, I try to get those out within a couple of days of receiving those. I don't think anyone has waited more than 2 to 3 days to have all their employees once that spreadsheet has hit our inbox.
Okay. And then finally, this is a reporting question.
Oh, can I say one thing?
Sure.
Also, when you submit a license request form, that goes to our web developer. The web developer may not get it to me until the day after or 2 days after. So that would add to the time.
Okay, great. And then finally, in terms of reporting, does that show how many licenses have been requested versus how many have been used?
So when you go to your report, what you'll essentially see is all the names of the people in your system. So that would align with the number of licenses that you've requested and that you've used. Because theoretically, you wouldn't have any blank spaces for unused licenses. Now, if you send out a request for 50 licenses and you end up using only 25 licenses, what we would like you to do is, once you find out that you have an excess, let us know so we can correct it on our end, because we're purchasing the licenses in bulk, and it's really important for us to keep track of how many licenses we've given out and how many licenses that we may need to purchase.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. So,
is that it for questions?
yeah, I think in terms of the questions we have, most of them should have been answered
Okay.
with our Q&A and throughout the presentation. So,
All right. So we are now going to review the FAQ page on the CPB website. When you have a chance, please go and check it out. We intend to update it after this webinar with new questions posed today if they have not already been addressed on the website.
So this is what, again, the whole harassment prevention training program webpage looks like. The basic information at the top, and then the frequently asked questions at the bottom. But because it's a little different, we wanted to actually show you how it works. So Lauren, go ahead and pick a question. So she's hovering over, what if all of the people on my staff haven't taken the training by October 1st, 2018? We answered that question, but when she clicks on that, it drops down and says your station will not be able to certify compliance for your FY 2019 CSG agreement certification until all officers, employees, and interns have taken the CPB training. So CPB or comparable training program. So that's how it works. Why don't you take another one, Lauren? Okay, and this one, she's hovering over, my state requires harassment prevention training every 2 years. Will all CSG grantees in my state have to certify annually? She clicks on it, and it drops down. Yes, CPB requires all CSG grantees to certify annually. And so that's how the FAQ works. And so we were starting to notice that with a lot of the questions that we were getting, that they were answered in the FAQ. So we wanted to today show you where the FAQ is located and how it works. And we encourage you to use it.
We are now going to review important CSG reference documents, which can be found on the CPB website. If you have any questions regarding the general provisions, financial reporting guidelines, and the like, this is the place to go. Greg will talk you through a couple of the documents.
So again, we are always more than happy if you send an email question to us at csg@cpb.org to answer your questions. But what we've also tried to do to make it as easy for you as possible to stay in compliance with your community service grants is that we have compiled all of the documents to stay in compliance into one page. So Lauren, why don't you hover over the radio CSG general provisions for a moment. When you click on that, which Lauren's going to do, that takes you to a page that has the general provisions. And then, Lauren, we didn't practice this, but why don't you go ahead and click on that and bring up the PDF. And one of the things that I do with all of these documents is if I need to find something, I use the find tool to search on, just scroll down just a little bit to show the general provision. I use the find tool to find the things that I'm looking for. But as you can see, we have a kind of an agenda there that shows you kind of where everything is located. So you can close out of that, and we'll go back into scroll down to beyond compliance to financial reporting guidelines for CSG. Why don't you click on that? And here we have the financial reporting guidelines going back several years. So you can click on one of those, PDFs, like if you click on the FY 2017. And again, that is where I use the find tool when I need to find something in the financial reporting guidelines. Like if I wanted to know everything that CPB has to tell me about indirect administrative support, I would, click on the PDF. I would then use the find tool and write in indirect administrative support, or IAS. That's one way to be able to use all of the documents that are compiled in this particular slot. Let's go back one more time. You may wonder how your CSGs are calculated. Under the additional documents and resources, we have the formulas and basic information as to how your CSGs are calculated. Lauren, why don't you click on the radio one again? And you can just scroll down. This shows you how your FY 2018 grants were calculated. And once the FY 2019 grants are calculated, we will put a new sheet like this up for FY 2019. But it basically shows you how CPB calculates your grant. So I think that's it.
All right, now we're going to go over important links. The Navex Training link is here, and it's a hyperlink, so once you get to the PowerPoint, you'll be able to click on it. This is essentially the link that is sent to the station administrators as well as the employees in their notification emails. Navex Tech Support. This is their email. This is how you can contact them. It is elearning@navexglobal.com. So if you're ever having any software issues with the Navex training module, they are who you would contact. If you have questions for CPB concerning the harassment prevention training program or the requirement, please contact us at csg@cpb.org, and we will try to get back to you as soon as possible. And for our important dates, of course, Friday, September 14th, CPB must have all completed employee user account spreadsheets from the stations in order to create the employee user accounts for you guys. And then our last date is Monday, October 1st, 2018, and that is the date all stations must have their current employees, officers, and interns trained in order to fulfill the FY 2019 CSG requirements. All right, so I just want to thank you guys for joining us. We hope this cleared up any remaining questions regarding the harassment prevention training requirement and the Navex system. Of course, if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us.
Thank you to our CPB panel, and thank you to everyone for attending today. Later this month, this webinar will be on the resources portion of the PMBA website. As a reminder, if you would like to receive CPE credit for this session, please email info@pmbaonline.org. Again, that's info@pmbaonline.org to request your certificate. Thanks again, and have a nice day.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.